Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation slash panel discussion. Today, we're going to be presenting on the power of partnership in advancing farm to school in Arizona. I do want to note that we originally did this presentation live at the Arizona Food Summit, specifically the 2022 Arizona Food Summit, and we had some technical difficulties with the sound. So today we're here on Zoom, re-recording so that you can all enjoy and learn from this discussion. So we'll just start off with some brief introductions and then we'll continue on. I'll start. My name is Raevyn Xavier. I work at the Arizona Department of Education within the Health and Nutrition Services Division. When this was originally recorded, I was on the Food Acquisition and Nutrition Systems team, and now I am a proud member of the Program Access and Outreach team.
My name is Paige Mollen. I'm the co-founder of the Mollen Foundation. We're a local Arizona nonprofit.
Hi there, my name is Katie Poirer. I am the executive director of the Mollen Foundation.
All right, and I'm going to go ahead and kick off our short presentations with an overview of the Arizona Farm to School Network. So, as I mentioned, I work at the Arizona Department of Education within the Health and Nutrition Services Division, and we were awarded a grant, which is funding the development of our state Arizona Farm to School Network. And I was hired around March 2021 to manage this network. So over the past year plus, I've been doing a lot of work towards building a state network that is effective, equitable, and sustainable, even after completing our grant. So before I get into information about the Farm to School Network specifically, I want to just back up a couple paces and define what farm to school is under the network. Farm to school is a word that has gotten a lot of buzz in the last couple of years, but people kind of approach it with from different angles and different perspectives. So I just want to share that according to the National Farm to School Network, farm to school is comprised of three pillars. The first being food education, the second being school gardens, and the third being local food procurement. If you are doing any of these activities, whether you've received a farm to school grant from USDA or from the National Farm to School Network or any other support organization, you are doing farm to school. So I just want to make that clear that this network is open to anyone doing any activities that fall into those pillars. It's a very large umbrella, and we are moving towards creating a state network that welcomes everyone and supports everyone doing this type of work. So our current definition of the Arizona Farm to School Network is that we are a statewide hub of resources, connections, and support intended to support all people working to implement and sustain farm to school programming. So the visual you see at the bottom of the screen is a really good representation of what we're trying to move towards. So there's been phenomenal farm to school work going on across the state for many, many years, but we really want to strengthen our understanding and our tracking of what is going on so that we can celebrate our successes, identify areas that need more support, and just essentially have a better sense of where we are so that we can plan and chart ahead for where we're going. So kind of shifting from farm to school work is happening, but where, who is involved, how is it benefiting our students and our local producers and our community members, to actually having pinpoints on a map, so to speak, so we can confidently articulate the profound impact farm to school is happening in our state specifically. So the three main objectives that are kind of deliverables that the Farm to School Network is currently working to deliver can be broken down into we're calling it a statewide directory of connections and people doing farm to school work. So connections, networking is the first big one. And the intent with that is that this work is very interdisciplinary. It requires support from many different fields. And the more that we work together and strengthen our relationships, the stronger the work is. We can do a lot more together than apart. The second is data. So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but really working towards strengthening our information and our data and our research around farm to school and making that information accessible so that we all can move forward in our work more informed. And also data is a very powerful tool in advocating. So advocating for policy changes, advocating whether that's at a state level or a local level or at the school level. Knowledge is power, data is power. And then the third kind of outcome deliverable is that we really want to centralize resources. So there are a lot of resources for farm to school out there, but as I don't want to generalize, but most of you know, likely coming to this presentation, Arizona is beautifully unique and it houses many different ecosystems and many beautiful different cultures. And we want to make sure that we're creating resources that truly benefit the uniqueness of our lands in Arizona and our people in Arizona. So that brings me to kind of describing the workflow of our network. We are comprised of kind of two main pieces. The first is our steering committee. So the steering committee is really focused on kind of the big picture systems work of the network to make sure that we're being set up, again, effectively, equitably, and sustainably. So this is a committee dedicated to developing network systems that will provide data, a statewide directory, and resources to members of the network. And I'll go into kind of how specifically that looks in a moment. The second piece are our work groups. So we have 4 work groups right now: food education, school gardens, farm to ECE or early childhood education, and local food production and procurement, with potentially room to expand as we continue to evolve and kind of strengthen our foundation and our systems. There's been talk of implementing potentially a farm to school policy work group. There's been talk about implementing a native farm to school work group. So there's a lot of room for growth. And the intention of work groups is to really create a consistent meeting space facilitated by work group chairs to promote, support collaboration, or to promote, support, collaboration, and inspiration. The enunciation helps the understanding of that definition in farm to school efforts. So really making sure that that's a space that anyone can participate in, and working to design them in a way that it's a great space to network, it's a great space to get resources, and it's also a great space to connect with colleagues that you can work together with on projects or initiatives, et cetera. And essentially this all comes together. These two groups are definitely connected, but we kind of have different lenses that we focus on throughout our quarter. And then we come together for our quarterly meetings where it's an assembly of all, like the full network, steering committee, work group members. And we share updates on both of those groups. We create space for networking. We do some partner share outs, and we also always have policy updates. So just a really good kind of 4 times a year touch point on what's going on with the farm to school network. Next slide, please. So I just want to quickly touch on kind of our specifics within our leadership structure. Each of our work groups has 2 chairs or 2 co-chairs. I'm not going to list them to avoid repeating myself. You can see that on the screen. And the intention with making sure that there's 2 chairs is to make sure that there is a lot of support in facilitation, and it doesn't just fall on one person. So very balanced there. This has been very effective so far, and our work group chairs have done a phenomenal job facilitating and really being innovative about how to make their work group meetings really engaging and supportive of the needs of those that are participating in those work groups. Next slide, please. This is our steering committee leadership structure, or essentially a list of our chair positions. So the steering committee is composed of the network manager, which is myself, kind of tasked with just making sure that overall network objectives are being met and systems are running smoothly. Our engagement chair, who is kind of like our network hype person and is really looking through the lens of engagement and support for our members. So making sure that anything that we're offering or the way that we're engaging is truly being informed by the needs of our many communities that fall under farm to school. And the intention with being so intentional about these chair titles and roles is to make sure that there is a clear lens that our chairs are looking through when they're participating in steering committee meetings. So just wanted to throw that caveat in there. But our third is the communications chair. So they're really looking through the lens of how we're communicating and focusing on outputs like newsletters, website design, things like that, of how we're communicating farm to school to the field. Our implementation chair is essentially focused on how work groups are being implemented. So they're the main support for our work group chairs. So they are making sure that the needs of the chairs are being met. They're supporting the systems that need to be developed to support work groups. And they are also serving as a connector between the work groups and the steering committee. We definitely work together through the quarter, but we're working through different lenses. So the implementation chair is at steering committee meetings to make sure that there's always a strong bridge and strong connection, which it was kind of inspired from the sociocracy philosophy, if anyone's familiar with that. Moving on, our equity chair kind of says so in the name, but our equity chair is tasked with making sure that equity, inclusion, and justice is being woven through our network development as we continue to move forward. Our data chair is really focused on how we are sharing information and data and research. Our cross-network collaboration chair is very important for kind of staying tapped into other coalitions and work groups and networks so that we are designing our work in a way that's supporting other groups, not reinventing the wheel, and making sure that our work is complementary and not just replicating efforts. And lastly, we have a finance chair that is tasked with staying up to date on funding that's available for farm to school efforts, and also tasked with thinking ahead about how do we sustain the farm to school network past the completion of the farm to school agency grant that HNS received, which I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. Next slide, please. When we recorded this, we did have quite a few chairs vacant. At this point, we have a data chair. Our data chair is vacant and our finance chair is vacant, meaning that we are looking for support to fill those roles. So if you happen to watch this presentation between June 2022 and July 22, and you have an idea of someone that would be a good fit for those roles, whether it's yourself or a colleague, feel free to email the Farm to School Network inbox, which I'll put in the chat. We are definitely looking for support to make sure that we have a full steering committee moving forward. And our work group chairs positions are currently full, but those will be rotating as years go on. Next slide. And lastly, I just want to close with a couple of opportunities to get involved with the Farm to School Network. Again, we want to be very open and inclusive to everyone doing this type of work and being responsive to the many different needs of our different groups doing this work. So the most critical way to get involved is to fill out the interest form. That helps us understand your interests and also get you on the list for communications from the network so that we can keep you up to date on meetings, like work group meetings, quarterly meetings, and upcoming events. And speaking of events, when we originally did this presentation, it was before May, before this Farm to School gathering. So at this point, it has passed for this year. However, we do have an amazing resource that can be used to see the recordings that took place during that really incredible event and learn more about the network. So we have a post-event toolkit that houses all of our recordings and was really intended to be a continued resource after the event to continue to inspire conversations and learning around Farm to School. So if you are interested in that toolkit, again, email the Arizona Farm to School inbox and we can send you a copy. Next slide. And that's it from me. So my email is on the screen. I will also drop that in the chat so that you can easily access it. And I am going to go ahead and pass it off to Paige and Katie from the Mollen Foundation.
Thank you, Raven. Before I get started, I wanted to add that I also represent the Arizona Farm to School Network as the Food Education Work Group co-chair. And I just want to commend Raven on the incredible work that she's done to grow the network over the last year. And I would encourage you watching, if you have any interest, to reach out to her and join us in forwarding farm to school work in Arizona. So Katie and I are going to share more about the Mollen Foundation. We're going to give you some info on the history, the mission, and some of the farm to school work highlights that we're involved in currently. So our mission at the Mollen Foundation is to educate and empower schools and communities to transform their lives by adopting healthy habits. and that's to achieve lifelong benefits. And the way that we do that is through a lot of focus today that we'll talk about is farm to school. So we work to integrate local food and support local farmers. We have educational programming that focuses on food, where we integrate that into the school day. And a lot of what we do is working through the use of school gardens. I'll tell you a little bit about the history. We started at a time in Arizona when schools were really super focused on high stakes testing in 2008. There was a gap that needed to be filled around fitness and nutrition education. So at the time, a lot of schools were looking at eliminating recess for kids in elementary school, and also eliminating or significantly reducing physical education. So we saw a need with the focus that we had on childhood obesity prevention to work with that gap. And so we initially launched programs during the summer in community centers and the YMCA locations in downtown Phoenix. And shortly thereafter, we ended up moving into the school setting. We had some fitness education programs and nutrition education programs, and they were really working independently of each other and not completely connected. And we were on the campus of a K-12 school in downtown Phoenix and working with primarily 3rd through 6th grade. And there was a group of high school students that were really focused on school food. They were actually protesting in their school cafeteria. And one of the conditions to end that protest was that they asked to speak with us. They knew we were doing something healthy on campus, and they just wanted to engage us in supporting them. So we met with this group, and they were very much interested in having a student-led healthy snack bar. So we ended up working with them for the entire year to set up this program that they were interested in launching. They received a grant through ASU, and then shortly thereafter, they were really interested in growing food, which was something that we didn't do at the time. And so our deal with them was that we will work with you to grow this food if you understand that we're learning, you're learning, and it might be a little bit of trial and error. So we ended up getting some space over at Phoenix Renews. That's actually how I met Katie, who's now with us today. And we started with a small group of students, and it expanded into a program for 180 students that would rotate through as their requirement through their 9th grade health, fitness, and wellness class, which was amazing because we had students who said, I will never eat a vegetable. I'll go because I'm required to go to this space, but I will not eat a vegetable. And my response was, that's okay. Let's just grow some food together. And after one growing season, these students were asking to take home extra broccoli and Brussels sprouts. And then they were making meals with their families and then taking pictures of it, bringing it home to share with us their stories about how they made food together with their families. So knowing that that was super incredible, there was something to this growing food, we really moved into more farm to school work where we integrated programming into the day for students where they were actively growing food aligned to their standards. And it's been incredible. And so with that, we launched this program that Katie's going to tell you more about in a minute, Garfield's Garden on the Corner, which engages students throughout the day. And it's aligned to their standards. And we work with them on integrating programming. We open to the community after school hours, and we work on a whole host of other programs today, including integrating food into the cafeteria and all kinds of things around reducing waste in schools, and really a focus on comprehensive health and sustainability. And we'll go ahead and turn to the next slide, and I'll have Katie tell you more about our flagship program at Garfield School.
Hi, everyone. This is a map of some of the things we have on campus. So what you'll see is we have this kind of dog-legged area. This, when we found it, was 6,000 square feet of cement and not much else. So what we did over the past 6.5 years was recreate this into a little bit of an urban garden oasis. It is street facing, so we have a lot of visibility with the community. And we also teach now 4th through 8th grade. And we also have a 7th grade and 8th grade elective. And so what we have here is we have chickens. We have about 19 chickens, many of which we've incubated with the students. We have an orchard and shade tree area here on the right side of this image. And then we also have a very large vegetable garden. In addition to that, we have an area where we call this kind of a desert run or a McKinley run. This is an area that's planted with native and desert adapted trees and plants, and has very low water usage. On the opposite side of that, we have about 10 raised garden beds that were donated by a community partner. This is as a result of the work that we had done together previously, and was a big push to get food into the hands of families in need during COVID. So, and then we also have an interior courtyard. This is where we started here, where if you can see my mouse, there's a little area called courtyard here. We have about 7 raised garden beds in there. In addition, when the harvest is ready, we have a kitchen classroom that the students occupy and cook a seasonal meal together. And then they will obviously eat that meal together as well. So this is kind of one overview of the space. We've recently also redone the kitchen cafeteria, which we will show you in a little bit. And we also have a food pantry, and this was again spurred from COVID. These are some of the pillars that we've used and continue to use throughout the programming that we do with the kids. We do rotate through science, but we also incorporate history, we incorporate social sciences, we try to look at math as much as possible, and then we also have a social and emotional component. So when we are looking at putting together lessons and teaching, these are some of the pillars that we stand by. These are just a couple pictures of our program at play. We have noticed that kids, and we have spoken to kids about how they feel in the garden. Many of them say that they feel calmer. Several of them relate it to experiences that they've had with their family. They talk about being able to communicate better with their friends. And so there's a lot of life skills that come out of this program that kids get to experience hands-on. As part of our program, we also like to encourage kids to be leaders among themselves and for themselves. So we will do an opening circle where people will gather, the students will gather around in a circle. You'll see this kind of being modeled in one of the pictures on the bottom there. And we ask them a question that either has to do with the garden or kitchen lesson of the day, or is something like a get to know you activity. And at the beginning, our teachers will lead that. And then throughout the rest of the year, we actually ask students to self-select and have those opportunities available for them to take on a little bit of public speaking and demonstrate some leadership skill sets there.
Yeah, we also have noticed that when students grow their own food, they're more likely to try it. And if they get to season to taste a little bit and have some flexibility, then they'll eat it again. So it really does increase their consumption of fresh local vegetables, which is really unique in this program. And it's something that we think it would be incredible for all schools to experience. It's made all the difference in how they interact with real food.
These are just some more photos of our program at work. You'll see that kids work in the kitchen. We think that, kitchen equipment, yes, they're tools. And so we like to give students the opportunity to select the right tool for the right job. And they work in small groups between 8 and 10 students to create these recipes. And then they will, once they're ready, eat at the table in the classroom, talk about the dish, what they liked about it, what they may change. They can also discuss the history of the dish, and then they're responsible for washing the dishes and making sure that everything is set for the next class to rotate in. We've also done things around compost and vermicompost and actively compost in this program on campus in a variety of different ways. We grow seasonally, and we let our seasonal growth inform what we cook and when we cook it. This is the cafeteria piece. In 2020, we received some funding through a partnership with Phoenix Elementary School District to remodel the cafeteria. The equipment hadn't been updated since 1983 and had a 2-burner range and some very outdated ovens. Since then, we have put in a tilt skillet, we have put in a 6-range Vulcan burner and stove, an oven. We have also put in 2 combi steam ovens, as well as automatic dishwasher. So what this has enabled us to do is a lot of different things. We're able to cook vegetables really quickly without putting a lot of pressure on the current staff and disrupting the meal pattern and timing of the meal there. And then we've also been able to reduce a lot of waste because the dishwasher allows us to do reusable trays rather than throwaway foam trays. One of the things that's really important for us when we're looking at adding new menu items to the meal pattern is that they are student informed, meaning that after we serve this meal, we ask the students their opinion, and we have this little process. You'll see here it says love it, just okay, no thank you. So we have a table set up just outside of the cafeteria on their way to recess, and we ask every student to pick up a chip and vote how they felt about the meal. We also listen to any verbal responses that they have. I wanted more sauce, it was too dry. I wanted more cheese, too much garlic. I really liked it, it was great, I ate all of it. And so we take that and we accumulate that into graphs and charts, and we take that feedback on a consistent basis to our team and share the results with them and use that information and data to inform any adjustments that we make the next time we serve the recipe. In December of 21, we also had a certificate. We were able to get a certification to serve garden produce in the cafeteria. And so what you'll see here, if I'll just move this here, you'll see that we have served chard and rainbow carrots in a penne dish, and it went over very well. Paige, you want to take this one?
Sure. So another aspect of our program is local food promotion. So any opportunity when they're either in the cafeteria or in the classroom to promote what's growing seasonally and give teachers and the food service staff an opportunity to promote that. So here, what we're looking at is one of the Harvest of the Month resources that we developed when we were a recipient of the USDA Farm to School grant. So in this class, students were taking what was growing, which was a local Armenian cucumber, which we learned wasn't the best cucumber to use. We had a lot of seeds in that cucumber, but it was a lot of fun. And they made cucumber sushi in the classroom. So cucumber was the base with the rice, and then they were also invited to incorporate a whole host of other vegetables that were available in the garden at the same time. So this is something that could be integrated into a classroom lesson the way that we've done it here. And this was a group of 7th graders, or it could be a simple integration into the cafeteria as a side item, or integrated into a meal. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, we surveyed kids as the same, in a different format, but similar to what Katie was speaking of in the last slide around whether they liked it or they didn't like it, and then if they would like to see it again in the school cafeteria. So we focus on any and all opportunities that we have available to promote what grows in Arizona, promoting local farms and local farmers in the school, so that students have more exposure to what's available to them.
This information is available at our website, and I will put that link in the chat. So I think, this is a program that was developed because of the pandemic, and it's a food pantry. Mollen Foundation has sat and facilitated what are called site council meetings at Garfield. This is a collection of partners that add to the success and excellence of students at Garfield and support their families in a variety of different ways. So we would meet every 2 weeks. And when the pandemic hit, all of that switched to a virtual model. And I had run across a grant for distributing fresh produce. And I was also aware that local farmers were struggling to source their product because of massive restaurant closures and prohibitions of that kind. And so I reached out to the partners and I said, I'm writing this grant. Would you like to contribute? And they all said yes. And what has happened from that is a very solid and supported program that distributes pantry items and fresh produce to families in need within Garfield. So how this works is throughout January of 2020, no, I'm sorry, throughout July of 2020 through December of 2021, we ordered local produce bags to Garfield. We also had activity at Dunbar and Hurd Elementary, as well as Capitol. And we ordered these bags and they were packaged. And then we also paired that with pantry and staple items that were sourced from a partner, and that was Trinity Cathedral. So we got the bags, Trinity got the pantry items, and then those were distributed in particular at Garfield by AIMRIGHT, and then at the other schools by various partners within the school or partners of the school. We served over 270 families per month. Right now, this program continues. It is in a smaller format. Garfield does still have the pantry, and we will give produce from the garden when available. These are just a couple different. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to share that these are a couple of videos from our program, and it's probably loud on the volume, but just to give you an example of how these kids really develop their skills. It looks like Katie's helping out here by you're going to go ahead and play this one. Take a look. This is one of the students, Will, and he's a little superstar at chopping, mincing, and knife skills. And then on the right hand side, this was a student who, you might want the volume on this one. Well, maybe it's not working, but this is a student who was really struggling. If you notice, like, he's so happy because he was struggling to flip this omelet, and he's working here with Doug from Gallo Blanco, who's awesome. He comes in and works with the kids a lot, and he was kind of struggling there. And in the background of these what's great is that the students were cheering him on, so they're like, yay, and then he's smiling and so proud of himself. So these are the types of things that come out of programming when you have the opportunity to work in schools with students. And in the middle is just one of our farmer partners and now staff at Phoenix, Elle at Garfield, and Maya Daly. She's just out there working on the farm.
I'm a little confused as to where we have just gone in our presentation. Is this perhaps the last slide, Ms. Paige?
So this would be, I would say, the last slide before let's move on to those moderator questions that I believe Raevyn will take it from here.
Perfect. First, I just want to interject that, speaking of partners, it is such a pleasure to be on this panel again for a second time with both Paige and Katie. They are both a wealth of knowledge and passion and creativity, and what they have built through the Mollen Foundation is truly astounding. And I also want to mention that just in my experience working with them, they're so generous about the information that they share and their willingness to support others embarking on this type of work. So I just wanted to offer you both some kudos, because I am always incredibly grateful and am constantly learning a lot from both of you. But I'll also go ahead and launch us into our moderator questions by first asking, what have you learned in the last several years, kind of in the context of COVID, in the work that you do? And let's go ahead and actually, I'll go ahead and start off with this one. So when COVID hit, I was working at a university at ASU as a research study coordinator, and I was managing a big group of undergraduate and graduate students. We were working on a school lunch study, which was focused on plate waste and essentially assessing whether adding a salad bar or nutrition marketing was effective in increasing. We looked at all food components, but specifically fruit and vegetable consumption during lunch. So we did a lot of field work. We drove all around Arizona, collecting that information in schools. And then when COVID hit, it all just stopped. And like everyone else, we had to adapt. And as a manager, I really learned that the focusing immediately on picking up productivity wasn't the most effective strategy. It was really supporting connection and support among staff that helped us by default continue to succeed in our goals. So that was a huge learning for me, that you really have to focus on connection, partnership, supporting one another, to strengthen the work that you do. So I wanted to share that. And then the second piece is that I graduated with my master's degree last year and embarked on this job as a health and nutrition services specialist. I was originally titled the farm to school specialist. And I started at a time that there continues to be a lot of uncertainty, but especially kind of a couple months after the onset of COVID, there was a lot of change, a lot of disruption. And what I learned was to be brave and bringing forward new ideas and new, being creative, new potential solutions, and being okay with trying something and failing, because at the same time, there was kind of this openness of so much is changing. We're letting go of the old ways. Like, what can we do better? What can we strengthen? And so that was another really big learning from the last couple of years that I hope that I continue to take with me. So I want to go ahead and pass it off to Katie to answer the same question.
We had programs running actively in not only Garfield, but several other schools with the program Paige talked about, Harvest of the Month. And so in March, when schools closed, our programs folded at other schools, and then they became virtual at Garfield. What we needed to do and had learned to do was to be patient and, again, flexible, because there were student absences, there was staff loss, there was grief, there was supply chain disruption, all of which affected how people showed up and how we embraced them being there at that moment. And so we just had to be very aware of pacing, and we also had to be flexible and adaptive and listening to the immediate needs of our community and assess short-term goals very differently than we had previous to COVID-19. Yeah.
And just to add to that I agree with both of what Raevyn and Katie are saying. I would have the same response. And I wanted to add that it was just a real learning experience for us to have to really listen, because I thought that I understood the communities, and until we were in a situation where everything shifted and the answer wasn't going to be the same, and the response wasn't going to be the same as it had been in the past with what we were doing. And we had to completely pivot from in-person to outside the day. And that really gave us the opportunity to know the people surrounding the school community. And just in listening so that we could troubleshoot and support them was the biggest thing that I learned, because when you think you know, but you aren't necessarily listening, and you don't know that you're not listening until you really listen. That's what came out of, if that makes sense, that's what came out of COVID for me, because I had no idea how many families were struggling with access to food. And it gave us more insight in how to really respond to that in a way that supported them and got them what they needed. And I think that we'll go on to the next question, and that is, how did you navigate during COVID, and how was partnership used as a tool? And am I starting? Okay.
Yeah. We don't have a moderator here, so we're winging it a little bit. But yeah, I can jump in. Self-moderating, shared interviewing. Um, Earlier in the presentation, I used the word members a lot, of like network members. But what members really means, it translates directly to partners in that context. We're really trying to move the network forward in a way that we're trying to break down hierarchy. Chairs are not above members. Steering committee is not above work group chairs. We're all equal partners, and partnership to me is really about reciprocity and offering support and receiving support. And reciprocity is definitely a word that I borrow from some really brilliant Indigenous philosophy. But I think about that all the time, that we are stronger in this work together. And I think that COVID has really showed us that too. I think that it was really easy to get used to kind of existing in a bubble even before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, we were forced into bubbles. And so now I'm seeing, careful navigation of how we reconnect and we value those connections, because the people that you have in your corner are truly keys to many different opportunities. And just in my work, kind of supporting and building this network, we started, there's been an amazing foundation laid, but we started with kind of a fixed amount of chairs, and we've really been opening up our doors to everyone come. Like we'll figure out how to organize this. And it's been really powerful just kind of being in this manager role of having the opportunity to connect with so many brilliant people in this field, and just watching conversations unfold. When you, like, I'll give an example of being at a school garden work group meeting yesterday, where we had teachers, and we had teachers that were like certified herbalists and permaculturists, and then we had school lunch staff, and we had garden coordinators, and we had state support, and just everyone together in that space and prioritizing that connection led to so much natural exchange of resources and ideas and questions. So that's just one of many examples of how I just, when we embrace the perspectives and value partnership and connective, and don't kind of stay in our go mindset of like, it's easier to work with the people I've always worked with, you really broaden your awareness and therefore broaden your impact. So yeah, that's something I could talk about forever. But partnership is the tool in network building. So yeah, that's my answer. I think I'll pass it off to Katie.
I think one of the things that we learned about partnership is that it's also a relationship. So not only are you mutually benefiting from each other's work, but you are also people. And so communicating just in terms of, this is what I need, or this is what we're trying to do, can you help me, and being expressive in that was very helpful for us to be able to pivot and provide the food bags, and have the experience and what we learned informed what we will do, not only now in this current school year, but in the future, and how we will handle the people that we hope to impact and positively influence. And so I just think that communicating with empathy was very important for us, and something that we learned to do in a partnership context that helped us to feel positive about the work that we were doing in a very unpositive and sad time. Anything to add there? Okay, so then that's on me. So the third question is, what have you been inspired by throughout this period of time that we're kind of discussing and recounting?
So I've been most inspired by really it's piggybacking off the last question and response, is the partnerships, because there's no way that we could have navigated this without the partnerships. And just one example that was really inspiring to me. So when we had to pivot and move out of the in-person learning, we also had the school lunch program going on at the same time we were in summer feeding. So what would happen is students would have their families come once a week and pick up food for the entire week. So some families had access to that, and the food staff really came together to make sure that families had food. In addition to that, there were families that just couldn't get to the school to get their food. So there was a period of time where in that pivot, we ended up delivering food. So when some people had access, they'd pick up food, but then we partnered with the people that we work with throughout the community. So there was AIM right across the street. Trinity was bringing food. AIM right was delivering food. We were delivering food. And one day when I was delivering food, I went to the door of a student that I didn't know that's whose house I was going to. I was just like quickly going through my day and delivering these bags. And he came to the door and he was so excited to see me standing there. He was in our programming and he was telling me how he's like, Miss, he's like, guess what? My mom lets me cook. So he was cooking meals for his family. And then on other doors that I knocked, parents were saying, hey, I'm good this week. I'm working. I'm healthy. I'm okay. I'm struggling. I'm okay. But can you go 2 doors down to the neighbor because I know that she has, 5 kids and she lost her job. And I just want to make sure that she had enough food. So can you just give her my food? So I was just inspired by all these people who came together no matter what. They may have been struggling, but they wanted to share. They wanted to lift up their neighbors and they wanted to support each other, and that connecting and support for one another in the community was life-changing for me. I have to say, I think about that all the time, and that's what inspires me in this work, that people are willing to support each other in their challenges. And then I'll pass it over.
I was getting emotional hearing you speak. And I think I just mostly want to echo what you said, that it's people that are inspiring, and it's supporting one another that's inspiring, and especially working within the food system, just the passion and the commitment that I've seen just in my role, which is a step removed from community sometimes, is just really, really powerful. There's a really amazing group that wants to make a difference, wants to support their communities, and just trying to bring everyone together in a shared space, and seeing eyes light up when people realize they're not alone and that there's support is really inspiring.
I think
I have one more question.
Okay.
So our final question, so apologies, I look over to my notes, but this was touched on a little bit, especially in both of your presentations, about how are you focusing your efforts to improve food access specifically?
One of the things that I think is important is that looking at this not only as something that was impactful for people physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and using that understanding to inform short-term and long-term goals, because how we look at food access and how people relate to food and what are successful avenues and channels of communication and distribution that add value to the relationship that people have with food is something that we discovered throughout this process and informs the work that we do moving forward. And so I think that it's just important to understand we're really not out of the woods yet in terms of what we have learned. I think we are continuing to learn. And so our charge is just to be understanding that we're still in this kind of information gathering space, and we're also still in a healing space. And so what that may look like for us 5 years from now we're not certain, but we're certain that from 5 years from now, we will be informed by these last 2.5 years considerably.
Yeah. And I also think, like, just in terms of tangible ways that we're looking to improve access in our work and our programming is that we do have food boxes that we share out, like growing spaces that we share food out to the community. So any opportunity that we have, we're sharing it with families, we're sharing it with the community. Our program has an element where we do open to the community after school hours, and that has been a little bit challenged during COVID, and we're just getting to a space where we can welcome the community back in. And so we continue to, any way and opportunity that we have to provide access is a big, it's an important aspect of what we do. The pantry remains open, and what's incredible about these partnerships that we've developed during COVID and continue to just enrich during COVID with the current partners that we have is that now we have somebody else. It started with us creating that pantry, but now the partners that we have are running that pantry, and they show up on a consistent basis to share food out and are very intentional about how they put those bags together to ensure that families have access to a full meal. So it's just something we're going to continue to work on and continue to improve.
Amazing. I'm a participant in this panel, but I feel like I'm also just absorbing the benefit of this conversation. And I just want to close out, I think, by briefly touching on how I feel the Farm to School Network indirectly supports and increases food access. And mentally, like, I almost want to break it down by pillar. And the goal of, the central goal of the network is to increase school garden programming, food education programming, and purchasing of local foods and school meal programs. And when we create the support to actually meet that goal and increase access to school gardens, I feel like the presentation from both of you illustrated it so well, that there is an abundance of food that is produced and it can go into meal programs, and you're offering a very, very fresh item that has a lot of value to the students that supported its growth. But then there's also an overflow that can go to communities. And so just an amazing access point for fresh produce. And then, which I've seen time and time again, and the more school gardens there are, the more access to that product there is. Those are essentially small scale farms. And then when we support farmers, as local farmers, in purchasing their products, we are supporting their finances and their ability to scale up and have successful yields and increase their business. And that is increasing our access to local food, because they're not just serving school markets, then they're able to continue to expand into other markets and increase access for community. And then with food education, I see that as when we educate ourselves and our students about food, you're also, and also through working in the garden and connecting with local farmers, you're educating future advocates for why access to fresh food is so important, and why food access is a human right. So just kind of wanted to close out there. But do either of you have anything else to add to this conversation before we wrap it up?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah, thank you. It's always a pleasure for us to be able to work with you, Raevyn, and we're excited to continue to move the work forward in Arizona. So we appreciate everyone joining us today. We hope that everyone watching is going to reach out and get involved in the work. It's really important work, and we'd love to have more people at the table.
I also adore working with both of you. So thank you for being here. And thank you, Arizona Food Summit coordinators, for inviting us, giving us this chance to speak. And right now we're speaking to each other in a Zoom screen. So if anything inspired you or you have questions, feel free to email us. Maybe Katie and Paige, I don't know if you want to drop your emails in the chat real fast, but stay in touch, and We look forward to continue building partnerships.
Thank you all.
Thank you.